I'd now like to introduce to you Victoria Cooper, who has been our Siganto Foundation Artist Book Research Fellow for the past, for 2015. And Victoria has been looking at montage compositions in artist books and zines. And Victoria is passionate about montage, and she can turn any conversation into montage. She began her studies in science and worked in laboratories, and then she moved to photography and visual arts, and she acquired a doctorate in 2013 from James Cook University. So I think without further ado, we'll welcome Victoria. She did have an assistant who's disappeared up the back. It's Doug Spout, who was our research fellow for the Siganto Foundation in 2014. So if Doug appears, that's who he is, and I'll hand over to Victoria, and if you would welcome her to this afternoon, please.
I have quite a lot of writing here because I'm researching, so essentially I have to write, and I have to write about visual things. So in that terms, I will do a little bit of reading, if you don't mind and indulge me, but I also have to kind of introduce an idea where, Paul Valéry has influenced me a lot in this whole process. For me, I'm really excited about the process of manufacture, and sometimes it's even more interesting than the work itself because there's a story to be told. In this particular quote, Valéry has said, sort of informing me that he is talking about not just how you go about making the book, but it's the artist's thinking and what they're trying to say through the book in their own mind. So it's a kind of material thinking process. So it's not simply about, oh, how did you do this? So, but can I indulge you in a little bit first by saying that I'm an artist as well? And as those of you who have been upstairs already to see the amazing books that are on display, my work comes from montaging. Basically, I can be working in the field collecting things because my background, my whole way of thinking is a montage between the scientist in me and the artist in me. So in the past I have worked on, I'll just quickly pull these up. There's one scroll on display up there, but this is a particular place and it's a montage. Each of those scrolls contain hundreds and hundreds of small little segments which came together and they were taken over a period of about a year. And so these became 5 scrolls from that place. So in this way I'm informed. My whole art practice and the way I think is like a montage, even when I'm out there making photographs. And also very much informed by William Robinson, the great artist. So here I am again, back in the laboratory, in the electron microscope room for my next project, which is again gathering information for my montage. And it's also my PhD project on water. And this is the landscape of water I was looking at. So how was I to bring something that's microscopic, so microscopic you need to be in a darkened room to see it and use huge equipment? How do I bring that into a kind of narrative montage? So in this case, the process was to bring it into the artist's book by creating narratives of water within spaces and architectural spaces. And I won't go into my PhD here, we haven't got enough time for that. But hey, it's a wonderful thing that as an artist I think in montage, and that's how I read and that's how I make. So these are all part of my I guess, my PhD, where I really deeply went into the way I think in montage. This is also informed by history, and I guess in a way, a lot of that history is really, from film. Eisenstein, those great German monteurs from the early 20th century, and Hannah Hoch and Hartfield and Lisztsky, all those great political monteurs, the Surrealists, Ernst Hart. Sorry, I'm going a little bit. I'm a bit dyslexic here. And Max Ernst and Salvador Dali, also there for their surreal montages and the poetics of that surreal montage. But some of the great page design that came out, and the sort of the bookish sort of designs that came and using montage, was through Laszlo Moholy Nagy. And it's really funny how he had his term for montage and he called it photoplastics. So in a way, there's a really interesting terminology thing happening here, which I'll allude to a bit later. But let's just I'll show you a great quote, a couple of great quotes from Eisenstein, which really informed my research in this project, where he, as a filmmaker, believed that the idea of montage went beyond just for making films. He could see that it could encompass all art forms, and it does. And the other thought that he had was, in his original concept of the montage, was that it was a meaning for cinema, was that the meaning in the cinema was not inherent in any filmed particular object, but was carried in the collision of those objects. And for me, that's part of the reason for me coming here and doing my research. This is written in the great tome on montage in reference to Eisenstein that Jeffrey Nell-Smith has written forward to. Okay, so more words, I'm sorry guys, but my project, and if you will let me sort of read it, because it's kind of, I spent a lot of time writing this in the last couple of weeks. Okay, so from my research and my PhD, I was drawn to the montage, I guess, in a way of thinking and making. In this fellowship, I'm now engaged with the montage and its reading. In many ways, the montage today has become so common that a considered analysis of reading could be timely. With an image-rich society, it's maybe important to slow down and take account of what's being said through this ubiquitous medium. It was important to me to focus on mainly artist books in the Australian artists, particularly of Australian artists, including Peter Lysiotis, Gracia Havey and Louise Jennison, Diane Fogwall and Lynn Ashby, who is with us today. And there are many more, I can say. But the works by British artists, also Helen Douglas and other international artists from the ALA collection, will also form a part of my review. Through this work of these seminal montage and collage artists, it is my intention to create a space for discourse to highlight the language and the syntax of the montage in artist books and zines. In this project, I intended to investigate the montage through reading the elements, their edges, their borders and their intervals. The act of cutting and splicing in the creation of the collage montage assigns new meanings and readings to the individual fragments. Each element fractured by tearing or careful cutting, whether physical or virtual in the digital space, before blending, overprinting or collage and construction phase, forms a basic structure. And I relate it back to film, a bit like a mise-en-scene, or syntax, or the final composition of the narrative work. So it kind of brings it, all these elements come into the page, almost like you're looking at a theatre things that are happening on the stage. I'm interested in the differences of reading that is created through of the visible edge. And that also includes a kind of fused and seamless edge where you don't see them, those edges at all. These edges, whether seamless or visible, always refer to the nature of its original content. As in the grafted fruit tree, where the origins of the element are still evident. The narrative then becomes embedded or montaged inside the reading of the image of the page. So, in a way, I'm kind of thinking really deeply. I'm slowing down. I'm really looking at each page, each montage. But there is a dilemma, and I constantly come up against this time and time again. Terminology issues. And I'm sure some of you are wondering, is she talking about a collage or is she talking about a montage? I must say for people who are not aware of this, this is a kind of constant. No matter where I've researched, I've found no real definitive answer to either, though their processes are incredibly similar. And it's interesting, they're both French words, and they both kind of mean the same sort of thing, where they bring elements together, glue them, cut them, and they actually form a new object. So, in a way, what does it matter? There is also pulp printing. Is that a kind of montage? Here we have a Marshall Weber and collaborative piece with Diane Fogwall and a few people from ANU got together and they created a unique state, but then it became, as what Marshall Weber called, a facsimile of 8, edition of 8 copies. So therefore, suddenly we are now looking at something not a unique state anymore. So is this a montage? Okay, so in this dilemma, I finally came to the resolve about a couple of weeks ago. I'm working through this process the whole time, and I'm seeing the most wonderful parade of books of collages and unique states. The ALA is an amazing place. But I said, okay, I'm going to have a statement of intent here. Rather than questioning terminology, whether it's a collage or montage, that is not what I'm here to do. I'm more informed about the way the elements are combined or grafted, the arrangement of the page, the typography, the page design. I again refer back to Valerie's statement about the process and what's informing me here. So when the elements of a collage, either type, montages, photographs, paintings, drawings, it could be anything, have been fused together within the space of the page, and this could be done digitally or photomechanically or just by photographing, there are many similarities. So, in a way, I've decided to, I make montages, so this is the way I read them. So I will refer to them as montages as I'm reading and thinking and writing about them. So if this helps people as I'm talking about them, I have to apologise for the fact that I'm only a montagist and not a collagist. So essentially, thank you. But it is a really interesting, and we know I've spoken to many people in this room about this idea, and I've just decided that this is the way I'm going to work it. Anyway, I do have this statement that if artists in their artist statement or in their books, their colophons have stated that they are collagists, then that is the way I will refer to them. And I will respect that within my research. So the methodology so far, and you must realise I'm kind of just been through the process of reading and looking at books. I haven't necessarily sat down and written the articles as yet. But I'm collecting a resource of observations and montage readings. And this will be a whole range of things. And I must encourage artists who have books in the collection to submit artist statements. I'm actually recalcitrant as well. And I'm thinking, oh no, I should be writing that. It's so helpful for a researcher to understand not so much your process, but your thinking and all sorts of things. Artist statements are great. So Peter Lysiotis is one of the most magnificent writer of artist statements, and any of you who want to just come in and check out books and understand process, get out Peter Lysiotis's files. They're fabulous. So material forms of the book I'm looking at, and the nature of the visual narrative. What has it got to say to me as a reader? Sharing and reviewing projects with other colleagues, like I go to White Gloves Rooms events. I invite people to come and listen to what I have to say. We share ideas. Writing blog posts, of which one is coming very soon, Christine, I promise. Maybe the week after next. And preparing work for publication, which is, beginning to start now as I come to the end of the actual research phase. So I'm observing the artists as they work. Their work sort of has been created. I'm kind of trying to be in that kind of mode of observing how it comes together. I'm creating a resource of the source of the individual elements of the montage, the cutting and severing method, the pasting, joining, blending, grafting, page design. I have an Excel spreadsheet, okay? And it's all there. So essentially, though, I come to the point where it comes within me as a feeling and a knowing. And I really love Diane Fogwall's term, discussion here, as she talks about her process and the elements that she used. So she used groups of everyday objects of nature and human things we use in our daily lives that define our personal environment and make up our history. They become like a personal iconography. And when I place these elements in sequence or in layers, they allow the space for the reader to imagine. And also the artist, I guess. They are akin to a page of text, using the same symbols, differing sequences, and create new meanings. And later she says, images evoke memory. Each image, when it is near another, creates a small narrative that touches each viewer in a unique way, but a common story is still told. And this is the kind of thing I'm touching with as well. It's not always about, my Excel spreadsheet. It's about, how I'm touched through the process of reading. So, let's have a look at some of the books I've been looking at. And of course, we'll have to go and defer to Australia's foremost. Here's my assistant in there. And he's going to read for your visual delight. Basically, Peter Lysiotis is Australia's and internationally renowned for photomontage. And anybody who has not had a chance to connect with his work, please come to the library. There's an amazing resource of his work. So in The Products of Wealth, he has created this book. But inside, and if I may read, I've got a particular discussion where his montages are not embedded in the page, as in the case of many books, but rather placed over as individual images and glued on top of the page. It's interesting because this then means that the book itself becomes rather a vehicle for those images, not necessarily as a thing in itself. And it's interesting then that when you look into these images, they're quite crowded, because as you do with the photograph or image, you tend to look into them. And the images now become windows, looking into a montage hybrid world that seems alien to us. But paradoxically, it is of us, because he brings together found objects, found photographs, and makes montages out of those. Now, basically, I am transported into the space of that landscape. And suddenly I feel there's no space left. It becomes almost claustrophobic. Therefore, that feeling, that claustrophobia feeling, that kind of terrifying feeling of being in that space, actually makes you reflect on on that kind of diabolical territories that he's creating for us to engage with. Let's go to another one. This is one of the very first books I engaged with when I was making my scrolls all those years ago, because those scrolls I made in the late 90s, early noughties, about 2001. So Jan Davis in 1996 created this wonderful book. And, you know, the idea of the montage here really fits within that oriental perspective of reading. If you've ever read a scroll, they have many different perspectives within that one space, so you get a sense of place by those montaged elements, and you can see to the left or to the right or straight ahead or from above. It's amazing how that comes into that one space, and it becomes a reading process. Another great artist, Normana White, very, very early on made this amazing montage book, or collage, as she says in her artist statement. So here she has an iconic sort of image, and she creates overlaps within that image and changes it and gives it new meaning. The book itself has many see-through transparency pages, very much like you would imagine as Photoshop layers. Now, Gracia and Louise, fabulous, amazing, poetic and playful. Very, very different in our reading again. In their collaborative book, And We Stood Alone the Night, foregrounds the abstract and imaginative context of visual reading through the arrangement and composite image along with poetic text across the page. Many of these have been digitally and metaphorically cut and glued, then grafted into the space of the page. Surreal and poetic hybrid forms drive the reading, and the smooth and seamless grafted joins, as you can see with this next image. The smooth and seamless grafted image actually presents new landscapes and colourful inhabitants. And as a montage reader, I read the entire page, the white space, the text to the side, and the floating elements. So, in a way, the careful cutting and pasting of the added elements actually, you know, really distinguishes the kind of collages that they do. And they are particularly adamant that they do create collages. So, in kind of reading their works and that seamless way of blending the white space and the page and the elements, I now, it kind of enables me to colonise that space and think about it in terms of a montage. And the playful nature of the combinations and placement within the white space encourage me to a slow read and thinking with an inquiring mind and imagine. It's almost like an Alice in Wonderland experience. Now, Jack Odine, I don't know if he's here today, creates these wonderful collage or paste-ups as the forerunner to his books. They're tiny little books. And this is called The Very First Book of Fish. 1999, so 1990 question mark is the catalogue entry. So he needs to fix that one up. Now, what I found with this is when I saw his original paste-ups, they were kind of like sitting on top, floating on top of the surface of the page. Whereas when I looked into his little zines, they seemed to float within a sea of the page, a bit like the flotsam and jetsam of everyday life. And very much the difference for me was amazing. But I really enjoy that feeling of the fact that it's within the page. It became a whole new environment for me to have it and imagine. Another artist uses cultural motifs and references historical images, but there again there is the use of found objects to create a really visual and interesting layering. So you don't really these everyday objects are totally transformed by this space, and there's the fact that it overlays the image. Joanna Cambrian is now creating a whole different way of looking at this cultural reference. Now, necessarily I'll talk about internationals because we do have an international here, so let's talk about a British person in reverence to her. But Helen Douglas is one of a very important reference for me, and I know for others in Australia. And her wonderful montage works are so intellectual, so engaging, and if you really want to have an experience of something beautiful but also something that gives you as the more you look. Her work references Marcel Proust, and also kind of uses that idea of the book that he wrote on Illé's Combray, uses the idea of memory and time and space to give you a new experience of reading through Montage in the book. She, in this book, collaborated with Zoe Irvine, and there's another layer, I think, of music that you can get. It's very difficult to play unless you can play little miniature CDs. And then, of course, there's Philip Zinnemann, and he made this one for Montage 93. So in 1993, he made this incredible book, which is more like a psychological thriller, where there is no space to think. And there is no comfortable space within that you can place yourself within that narrative. And as you turn the page of this very unconventional book, it really unsettles you as a viewer and a reader. And finally, another British person, Ken Leslie. This is yet another way of thinking about montage. And the idea of time, again, really highlights here, and the passing of time through photographs. And you can see the edges of the photograph overlapping, so you know time is passing. Isn't that amazing, that visual? If we sit down and think about that, it's visually we're getting that without it actually being delivered to us in words. So this one has also been a seminal book for me. Now, you might have noticed someone here playing down here with books, as you all probably would wish you would be doing rather than listening to me. But basically, he has a couple of books down here, which I would love to have shared with you, but technology is a little bit hard, but it's okay. You know what? You can come and see these books anytime. All you need to do is have a little reader's card, and you put your little reader's card and you can book it out, and there it will be on the 4th floor for you to hold and intimately connect with. Lorelei Clark is an amazing artist, young artist, and she created what I found to be one of the few people that I have found so far, and I'm willing to hear of others, should you know of any, that created really rough edges. That she actually, from what I've said here, she actually tore them, okay, and left them visibly torn. You can see those tearings and overlays, and these are have been scanned and reproduced. So the tearing, although you can see it, you can't feel it, but in your mind you can see it. So how does that feel to you? For me, again, I read it as a montage. So the elements combined in this way, for me, demand separate attention. They focus on the individual parts of the narrative or issue presented. So those become like words that signal things in my memory. The source material itself was glossy magazines and pictorial publications found every day. These edges can present then a critique, or perhaps even an attack, because I find that tearing kind of, not violent, but kind of angry. So perhaps it's an attack then on the effect of the human condition. In many ways, the reading is unsettling, rather like the political montages earlier of Peter Lysiotis. They shout back at the reader. So, thank you, Lorelei. This is the rest of her work, and you can, as Doug has down here, and he probably has been playing with it already, read that at any time. I'd like to bring another book made in the very same year that his Products of Wealth was done. This book is an entirely different look at the montage, an entirely different reading. It is mind-boggling that he did this in the same year. So, this particular book, Feather and Prey, this is the cover. And the reason why I've opened it out in that way is because I want you to see that the front and the back and the spine kind of have almost like a narrative already. So you're already engaging from the very cover with the narrative. So in a way, I'm alluding to another idea that I'll be talking about very, very soon as a final idea, that I'm rather interested in reading the book itself as a montage. So I chose Peter's book because in this book there is a lot of white space. And the montages themselves are embedded within the page. They're not sitting on top. And I particularly like this image because the cherub is pulling on a curtain string. And behind that is the sky. And you wonder, as I say here, I ask myself, where I get it, it's so good when you can write, because when you're thinking on your feet, you can't read it, do it as well as you can write it. But I kind of consider, for example, that, is there a sky behind that white space? What is that revealing? Or is it hiding something? It almost looks to me, even though it's in the plane of the same page, it almost refers to me to something that's happening behind that white space, almost like there's a fog or a whiteout or some other thing. But for me, for Peter, and I might quote him on this, so this is his quote: "The white spaces here constitute something unassuming, a whiteness more like a whisper, something neutral. In the whiteness, there are things the photographic paper has not allowed to reveal. These are not omissions, they are commissions of sins, failed intentions, of habit." I find that quote particularly evocative because I say, as I continue to turn the pages, they whisper of something hidden, where only hints and clues are allowed. As the photo montage emerges through the white space, I say here, as a cherub holds a rope that reveals a narrow view of the sky behind, does this white space hide knowledge from the reader? Or is Lysiotis creating a collaborative space where the reader can bring their own reading, narrative or composition? A psychological montage of memory and life's experience. Lysiotis' texts are evocative and poetic and political and appear sparingly in different places across the page. They create a visual experience in themselves. Sometimes they're big and bold and they shout at you. Sometimes they're understated and small and they're quiet. So the texts and their aesthetic placement on the page add to the layering of the reading as a montage. In Feather and Prey, Lysiotis signals that perhaps there could be shifting meanings arising in the reading of the words and their visual placement on the page. In the book he writes, and this is another quote from the book itself, "Words arrange themselves to tell the same story, that things will change. But words are heretics, and later, in the fire they will deny it all." And as we know, the photograph itself can be open to question without words. But words themselves are very much open to question as well, because there are always double meanings. It's a very, very beautiful book, and it finishes up with a page where it's essentially got a shell with an eye in the middle of that shell. And he said he had these two elements for many years, and he was trying to resolve what he was going to do with the eye and what he was going to do with the shell. And suddenly he put the two together, and it made sense to him. And that's the last page. You know, you can imagine a white space with just this eye inside a shell. For me, that's a powerful statement, and how I bring that out in my understanding of montage and how I think about that and write about that is my chore for the next few months. But I can say that I am totally moved by all the books that I have seen in this place. Now, there is one little thing that I've discovered in my research, and that is that there are many collaborations. And those collaborations, the people are entirely incredible individual artists, amazing in their own right. But when they come together, they create a whole new person, a new thing, in a way bigger than the sum of the two individuals. So I've been looking at a few of these artists, and of course there's Jan Davis and Stephen Spurrier, the famous connections of Stephen Spurrier and Ron McBurney. And then there's, again, Peter Lysiotis, who collaborates with many amazing people, and each time is something completely different again. In this particular book, it's Anne-Marie Hunter. And of course, the collaboration of Gracie and Louise. So this is one of the things I'll be really looking at as extending my idea, because it's becoming a really interesting idea for me to write about. The book is a montage. Lynn Ashby, have many people engaged with the books upstairs. This particular book that I will show you now is up there, and he may not agree with me, but it's my favourite book, Lynn. And it's about the movement and passing of time. And what an amazing little book. I have to say that each page is on, the transparent paper is, and you can actually see almost through the book the echo of time and experiences. And then there's this circle where each little segment of time has been montaged together, and there's little things. It's almost like a life's experience, it's knowledge, it's a cultural experience. You know, it refers to 20 minutes, but it could be a whole lifetime. It's a beautiful book to read through and experience slowly. Diane Fogwall, definitely the book is montage. The Gene Pool. For those of you who haven't engaged with that one, you get Diane Fogwall, the jazz singer, in a CD. You can listen to that as you read this book of her and her sisters' lives and their favourite songs. And so you read and you listen, and you actually visually read the things of their lives. That, to me, is the ultimate montage experience of a book. But there are so many more. And if I may just put this idea out there, Pierre Bourdieu is one of a very interesting social scientist commenting on art and how artists live and work. For me, this is a really interesting statement, that The book or the artwork itself is not only made once by the artist and by the reviewer, but it's made hundreds and thousands of times by all of those who have had an interest in it, who find a material or a symbolic profit in reading it, classifying it, decoding it, commenting on it, reproducing it, and so on. Now, how true is that? So, in a way, my voice is going to be part of a montage. I'm going to produce something that you can read and you can add to. And I do say the blog is a perfect place for you to do that. All of us, there's words from Doug, myself, Lynn, and wonderful blog posts by the other creative fellows like Clyde McGill and Julie. And you can actually add to that. You can add comments. You can create a whole discussion there that just enriches the idea and remakes the art over and over again. It becomes a wonderful thing. So in finishing, I would really have to commend that you guys come in and have a look and share the actual books themselves, see them, or engage with the blog. It is really quite an amazing thing to do. And I find that my experience here has been the most amazing experience. And I really absolutely thank the Siganto Foundation and Dr. Marie Siganto and Mary Kajeski, Christine Drew and Beck and Sharon and Jeanette, but Helen Cole, because she has such knowledge, and all the way along I have been picking her brains. Irina has been a great support, and a good friend, Felicity Ray. And certainly my partner here must be considered important. But I have to say in closing, I know it's already been said, the acknowledgement of country. But if I can in my own way acknowledge country, I really like to acknowledge country, the people and the traditional owners of the land, mainly through the wonderful storytelling that would have gone on way before this building here was built, through those generations. I'd like to acknowledge that in my talk today as a final acknowledgement. So thank you very much for staying and listening, and hoping you did enjoy what I had to share with you at this stage of my research.
It was wonderful.
Well, thank you, Victoria. I don't think I'll ever look at artist books that have been montaged or collaged in the same way again. I really appreciated your talk this afternoon. It's fabulous, and do come and look at some of the books in our collection. So that concludes the events for today. So I'd like to thank Dr. Marie Siganto for coming along and sharing with us this afternoon, and for all her work with the Foundation. It's just absolutely superb. We really appreciate everything that you do to help us promote our artist book collection. I'd also like to thank the Siganto Foundation Fellows for the wonderful jobs that they have done. It's just been such a privilege to work with the fellows as they come through. They're all different, they've all got something to say, and it's really been a wonderful experience for me. And also thank you to everyone for coming along and staying today and making today such a success. I think we've had a wonderful turnout of people come to view the artist books upstairs in level 4, and we've had a fabulous turn up to listen to our lovely Clyde's performance, and also today to listen to Guy, our visiting lecturer and crafts person, and to everybody who's come along today. Thank you so much.